Hi all. There's been a lot of talk recently about the distribution of income in the United States. Really, the question is, who has how much money? How much does the top 1% really have? How much does the bottom of the income distribution really have? What I want to look at today is, how do we measure this? And once we've measured it, this will help you understand the readings in the text. It will also help you with the sapling. And this can be a springboard. This can be a basis that we can use to say, hey, how has the distribution of income in the United States changed over time? And also, how does it compare to other nations? What we generally do is we take a household. A household means all people living under the same roof that are sharing expenses. And we can look at what the distribution of income is among households. Suppose we start out. Suppose we say we have 5 people. We can rank these 5 people. We'll put them into 5 groups. If we had 10 people, we could put them into groups of 2. If we had 100 people, we could put them into groups of 20, whatever. But let's rank them from the lowest income group up to the very top group. And let's say the lowest person, the lowest group has $2 of income, the next $4, the middle 8, and the next group 14, and the very top group 22. We've ranked them from bottom to top, and then we see how much income each group has. So when we do this, the next thing we want to do is we want to total it up. So we see in this case 2 plus 4 plus 8 plus 14 plus 22, that's 50. 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 8 is 14, plus 14 is 28, plus 22 is 50. Now we ask the question, what share of the income goes to each of these groups? We can do this as a percentage. So what we can see here is that the bottom group has 2 of the $50, that's 0.04, that's 4%. The next group has 8%, the middle group has 16%, and so on. As you can see what I've highlighted in red, if I lost you, stop, start over, and see if you can understand it a second time. I am always here. I'm always checking email. If you still need some help, just drop me an email. I'll be glad to get back to you and explain it. So what we've done here is we've gone from what share, how much income each group has, to what percentage of the income that is. Now we're going to introduce another concept that's very important. It's called the cumulative percent. Oh my gosh, that's so frightening. What does that mean, cumulative percent? We just want to know how much income goes to each group and those below it. In other words, the bottom group has 4% of the income. The bottom 2 groups have 4 plus 8, 12% of the income. The bottom 3 groups have 4 plus 8, that's 12, plus 16, that's 28% of the income, so on and so forth. So what we see is all 5 groups combined have 100% of the income. Just a way of adding up things that we're going to look at to make a measure, something called the Lorenz curve, that will show us what the distribution of income is like. So, if I've divided, and this is what we do, the population into 5 equal groups, each group has the same amount of the population. Each group has 20% of the people. So, what I want you to do is calculate the cumulative share of the population. What percentage of the population is in the bottom group, the bottom 2 groups, the bottom 3 groups, the bottom 4, all groups combined. Now, why don't you pause the video and calculate that, write the answers down, and then restart it and see if you got it right. If you didn't, rewind it and see if you can figure it out. Ready? Pause. Okay, the bottom group has 20% of the population, the next group 40%, the group after 60%. In other words, the bottom 3 groups in terms of income the 3/5 of the population with the bottom income has 60% of the population. The bottom 4 groups 80%, and everybody has 100%. Okay, so when we look at this, what we've done here is we have calculated what is the cumulative percentage of income and the cumulative share of the population. To make the Lorenz curve, L-O-R-E-N-Z, we only need these two columns. The lowest group has 4% of the income, 20% of the population. The next group, the lowest two groups, have 40% of the income, 12% of the population. The bottom 4 groups, everyone except the top, has 80% of the population, 4/5, but 56% of the income. So we only need these two columns in red. So what we see here is, here's the share of income held by the lowest group, the lowest 2 groups, the lowest 3, the lowest 4, and here's the share of the population. What we're going to do now, oh my gosh, a day without a graph is like a day without sunshine. So let's let that sunshine in. Let's make the Lorenz curve. Let's take this data and make the Lorenz curve. There we go. Okay, what we can see here, we put on the vertical the share of the income. Here we put the share of the population. The bottom 20% has 4% of the income. The bottom 40%, 12%. The bottom 80%, 56%. This is the Lorenz curve. This line here, this straight line, that's if we had perfect equality. In English, if everybody had the same level of income. In other words, if income was perfectly equally distributed, the bottom 20% would have 20%, the bottom 40% would have 40%, the bottom 60%, 60%, and so on. So that's how we come up with what's called the Lorenz curve. Now, a couple of important points. The farther the Lorenz curve is from this straight line of perfect equality, the more unequal the distribution of income. Now we can quantify it. Now we can measure it. If the Lorenz curve has gotten farther away from perfect equality, then what we say is we have more income inequality. There's also a numerical measure called the Gini, G-I-N-I coefficient. That is the area of A over the area of A plus B. In other words, everything in the triangle. That's just a numerical way of measuring the Lorenz curve. In other words, of this triangle that shows all the income, how much is the distance here between the Lorenz curve and perfect equality? So it's a way that we can measure things. So, having said that, what does the evidence show? The Lorenz curve and the Gini coefficient do show certain things. First of all, since the 1960s, income inequality has increased in the United States. It has steadily increased. It's gone up by about 20%, one way of measuring things. So the first thing we see is that income does, in fact, has in the United States become more unequal over time. Now, the United States does have a tax system. It's what's called a progressive tax system. We tax higher income people at a higher rate than lower income people. However, despite the tax system and what we call transfer payments, you can read about that in Chapter 14, various programs we have to give money to low income people. Despite those, what we find out is that makes very little difference in the distribution of income. So the point is, in the United States, income tends to be, has gotten more unequal. Compared to other developed nations, those in Europe, Japan, other nations like that, the distribution of income in the United States tends to be more unequal. Now, we talked very briefly at the beginning about positive economics. These are facts. The fact is, income in the United States tends to be more unequal than other developed nations, and it has become more unequal over time. Is that bad? That's a value judgment. That's what we call normative economics. Some people say this is a really bad thing. It's not good that some people have so much and others have so little. Others say that's the way a market system works. If you have a really good idea, if you're somebody, let's say, like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, and you come up with some really great stuff, you should make a lot of money. If you're, a famous actor or a famous singer that can make a lot of money, make a lot of people happy, more power to you. Other people say that's not fair. It's not my job to tell you whether or not that's fair. Go over to the philosophy department. Go over to other departments. They will work with you in terms of ethics, what's right, what's not. My job here is to say, okay, can we measure it? And the answer is yes, we can, and those are the results. By the way, if you look at developing nations, I've spent a lot of time in Mexico, but if you look at nations that are in the process of developing, you'll find out there that actually income is more unequal than it is in the United States. So, just kind of a way to get you started understanding a little bit about income inequality. Just, some thoughts. Read chapter 14. I hope it'll make more sense after this and, the other video that I made. There's a sapling that's due on Thursday. Make sure you do that. Please, please, please contact me with any questions or issues. If you didn't understand this, if you had trouble playing it, just let me know. We're going through this together. And most importantly, stay well. Take care.